We gratefully accept your gifts and dedicate them to the work of the church. Would you please turn in your hymnal now to our preparatory hymn? It's number 128, entitled For All That Is Our Life. Please stand as you're willing and able. I'm extremely pleased now to introduce our speaker again this morning, Bill Dugan. Bill is a longtime member of our congregation. He, as most of us know, he's a history teacher at Sandra Day O'Connor High School. He and his wife Kathy and their son Tom live in Glendale, and they came to Arizona from New York City.
Good morning. How's that for volume? In the past, I've talked like this and it's a little too loud, so yeah. Is that better? Excellent. I kind of like Robert Ingersoll. I think I've read sermons from him in the past. I think the last one I read was Why I'm an Agnostic. I believe that was also from Robert Ingersoll. I guess I kind of relate to his beliefs. Okay, here we go. Superstition by Robert Ingersoll. What is superstition? It is to believe without evidence or in spite of evidence. It is to account for one mystery with another mystery. It is to disregard the true relation between cause and effect. It is to believe in miracles, spells and charms, and in dreams and prophecies. In short, it is to believe in the supernatural. Superstition is the child of ignorance and the mother of misery. In nearly every brain is found some cloud of superstition. Many people believe in lucky and unlucky days, numbers, and signs. Many regard Friday as an unlucky day, a bad day to start a trip, to marry, or to make an investment. Starting an ocean voyage on Friday could have no possible effect upon the winds, waves, or tides any more than starting on any other day. And the only possible reason for thinking that Friday is unlucky is that it is said to be so. Many people think that it is dangerous for 13 people to dine together based on the number that attended the Last Supper. Now, if 13 is a dangerous number, 26 ought to be twice as dangerous. And 52 must be 4 times as terrible. Overturning the salt is very unlucky, but spilling the vinegar makes no difference at all. So why salt should be so revengeful and vinegar so forgiving has never been explained. There are thousands of unlucky things, warnings, omens, and prophecies, but all reasoning human beings know that every one is an absurd and idiotic superstition. For many centuries it was believed that eclipses of the sun or moon were prophetic of pestilence or famine, and that comets foretold the death of kings, or the destruction of nations, the coming of war or plague. All strange appearances in the heavens, the northern lights, circles around the moon, falling stars, filled our otherwise intelligent ancestors with terror. They fell to their knees and did their best with sacrifice and prayer to avoid the threatening disaster, and they cried to the heavens for help. The clergy, who were as familiar with God then as the Orthodox preachers are today, knew exactly the meaning of eclipses and northern lights. They knew that God's patience was nearly exhausted and that he was whetting the sword of his wrath. The people could save themselves only by obeying the priest and by doubling their contributions. Earthquakes and cyclones filled the coffers of the church. In the midst of disasters, the miser opened his purse. In the gloom of eclipses, thieves and robbers divided their booty with God, and poor, honest, ignorant girls gave their small earnings to soften the heart of a vengeful God. Now we know that all these signs and wonders in the heavens have nothing to do with the fate of kings, nations, or individuals, that they have no more reference to human beings than they do to a colony of ants, hives of bees, or the eggs of insects. We know now that the signs and eclipses, the comets, and the falling stars would have been just the same if not a human being had been upon the earth. A little while ago, there was the general belief that there were healing virtues in the bones of holy men and women, in hairs from martyrs, in bits of wood and rusty nails from the true cross, in the teeth and fingernails of pious men and women, and in 1,000 other so-called sacred things. The diseased were cured by kissing a box in which was kept some bone or rag or a piece of wood or some holy hairs, provided, of course, that the kiss was preceded or followed by a gift for the church. In some mysterious way, the virtue in the bone or rag or bit of wood flowed from the box, took possession of the sick, provided they had the necessary faith, and in the name of God drove out the devils who were the real disease. It was believed that all diseases were produced by evil spirits. The insane were supposed to be possessed by devils. Epilepsy and hysteria were produced by the imps of Satan. Every human affliction was the work of the malicious emissaries of the devil. This belief was almost universal, and even today the sacred bones and relics are believed in by millions of people. Today, no intelligent person believes in the existence of devils or that evil spirits cause disease, and therefore no intelligent person believes that holy bones or rags, sacred hairs, or pieces of wood can drive out disease. We know that the bone of a saint has in it no greater virtue than the bone of an animal, that a rag from a wandering beggar is just as good as one from a saint, and that the hair of a horse's tail will cure disease just as quickly and surely as the hair of a martyr. We know now that all sacred relics are religious rubbish, and belief in them is superstition pure and simple. Our ancestors did not regard these relics as medicine having curative powers. They thought that evil spirits stood in dread of holy things, that they fled the bones of a saint, and that they feared a piece of the true cross. And when holy water was sprinkled on a person, they immediately left the premises. In those days, the priests were fishers for money, and they used these relics as bait. The belief in the devil and evil spirits laid the foundation for another belief, that of witchcraft. It was believed that the devil had certain things to give in exchange for a soul. The old man, bent and broken, could get back his health and his youth if he would sign away his soul. Also, by charms and spells, a malicious person could obtain revenge, the poor could become rich, and the ambitious could rise to position and power. All the good things of this life were at the disposal of the devil. For all those who resisted the temptation of the evil one, rewards were waiting in another world. But the devil rewarded right here in this life. Terrible agonies were endured by reason of this belief in witchcraft. Families were destroyed, fathers and mothers were cast into prison, tortured and burned. Children were murdered, and many old, poor, and helpless people were stretched on racks, mangled and flayed. Now we know that witches never lived, that human beings never bargained with any devil, and that our pious, savage ancestors were simply mistaken. Our ancestors believed in miracles and signs and wonders. The world was supposed to be full of magic. What is a miracle? It is a happening without any reference to the facts in nature. Now we are convinced of what is called the uniformity of nature. We believe that all things act and are acted upon in accordance with their nature, and under like conditions the results will always be substantially the same. Miracles are impossible, and an intelligent person cannot believe that a miracle was or ever will be performed. Ignorance is the soil in which belief in miracles grows. While our ancestors filled the darkness with evil spirits, they also believed in the existence of good spirits. These good spirits had the same relationship with God that the evil ones had with the devil. They protected the faithful from the snares and temptations of the evil one. They took care of those who repeated prayers and counted beads. They drove doubts from the minds of the pious and sowed the seeds of faith and credulity. No one pretended to know exactly what these spirits were, or how they looked, or how they affected or controlled the minds of human beings. It was believed that the king of all evil spirits was the devil, and the king of all good spirits was God. This God and this devil were always at war, each trying to secure the souls of people. God offered the rewards of eternal joy and threatened eternal pain. The devil baited his traps with present pleasure, with the gratification of the senses, with the ecstasies of love, and laughed at the joys of heaven and the pangs of hell. With malicious hand he sowed the seeds of doubt, induced people to investigate, to reason, to call for evidence, to rely upon themselves, and encourage them to think, and in this way he corrupted humanity. Our ancestors believed that they could, by prayer, by sacrifice, by fasting, by performing certain ceremonies, gain the assistance of this God and of these good spirits. However, they did not believe that the devil was the author of all evil. They thought that flood and famine, plague and cyclone, earthquake and war were sometimes sent by God as punishment for unbelief. They tried with prayer and sacrifice to stay the hand of this good God, but the prayers all died in the heartless air, and the plague swept on to its natural end. Our fathers knew nothing of science. Back of all events were spirits, good or bad, angels or demon, gods or devils. Nothing had a natural cause, and everything was done by evil spirits to ruin, punish, mislead, and damn humanity. The world was a field of battle, and here the hosts of heaven and hell waged war. No one, in whose brain has the torch of reason burns, believes in the existence of the devil. Back of this belief in imps, demons, and evil spirits, there is no evidence whatsoever, and there never has been. It does not rest on any fact. It was supported by mistakes, exaggerations, and lies. The mistakes were natural, the exaggerations were mostly unconscious, and the lies were generally honest. Back of these mistakes, exaggerations, and lies was the love of the marvelous. Wonder listened with greedy ears, and ignorance listened with open mouths. We know the history of this belief, and we know that its truth was established by the Holy Bible. The Old and New Testaments are filled with allusions to the devil and to evil spirits. If the devil does not exist, then the Christian creeds all crumble. The superstructure known as Christianity, built by our fathers, by popes, priests, and theologians, built with mistakes and falsehoods, with miracles and wonders, with lies and legends borrowed from the savage barbarian world, becomes a shapeless ruin. If we give up our belief in devils and evil spirits, we are compelled to say that a witch never lived. No sensible human being believes now in witchcraft. We know that it was all a delusion, and thousands of innocent men, women, and children were tortured and burned for having been found guilty of an impossible crime. And we also know, if our minds have not been deformed by faith, that all books in which the existence of witches is taught were written by ignorant and superstitious men. We also know that the Old Testament asserted the existence of witches. According to that holy book, Jehovah himself was a believer in witchcraft, and said to his chosen people, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live." This one simple line demonstrates that the Old Testament was written by poor, ignorant, superstitious people. This one line proves beyond all possible doubt that the Old Testament was written by men, by barbarians. John Wesley was right when he said that to give up a belief in witchcraft was to give up the Bible. Give up the devil, and what can you do with the book of Job? Ministers who admit that witchcraft is a superstition will still read the story of that witch of Endor, will read it in a solemn, reverential voice, and then say that they believe it. It would be delightful to know that angels hover in the air to guard against the innocent and protect the good. But we have no more evidence of the existence of good spirits than we have of bad. The angels that visited Abraham and the mother of Samson are as unreal as the ghosts and demons of the Middle Ages. The angel who walked in the furnace flames with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, the one who slew the Assyrians, and the one who in a dream removed the suspicions of Joseph, were all created by the imagination of the credulous, by the lovers of the marvelous, and they have been handed down from dotage to infancy, from ignorance to ignorance, through all the years. Only those who are blind to facts can see these beautiful creatures, and only those who reach conclusions without the assistance of evidence can believe in their existence. Millions believe that the angel Gabriel contended with the devil for the body of Moses, that angels shut the mouths of the lions for the protection of Daniel, that angels ministered unto Christ, and that countless angels will accompany the Savior when he comes to take possession of the world. They believe through unreasoning faith, holding all evidence and all facts in theological contempt. In the old religious days of our ancestors, the earth was flat, and just above it was Jehovah's house, and just below it was where the devil lived. God and his angels inhabited the third story, the devil and his imps lived in the basement, and the human race lived on the second floor. God governed the world by hope and fear, by promise and threat, by reward and punishment. The reward was to be eternal, and so was the punishment. It was not God's plan to develop the human brain so that man would perceive and comprehend the right and avoid the wrong. He taught nothing but obedience, and for obedience he offered eternal joy. He loved the submissive, the kneelers and crawlers. He hated the doubters, the investigators, the thinkers, the philosophers. For them he created the eternal prison where he could feed forever the hunger of his hatred. He loved the credulous, those who believed without evidence. For them he prepared a home of eternal happiness. He delighted in the company of the questionless. Is there any evidence that gods or devils exist? The evidence of the existence of a god or a devil is substantially the same. Both of these deities are inferences. Each one is a perhaps. They have not been seen, they are invisible, and they have not ventured within the horizon of the censors. The old lady who said there must be a devil, or else how could they make pictures that look exactly like him, reasoned like a trained theologian. Now, no intelligent person believes in the existence of a devil, and most people who think have given up the idea of a personal God, a creative deity. They talk about the unknown, the infinite energy, and they put Jehovah with Jupiter. They regard them both as broken dolls from the nursery of the past. The men and women who ask for evidence, who desire to know the truth, care nothing for signs or so-called miracles. They care nothing for unlucky days or numbers, nothing for charms or amulets, good or evil spirits. They do not believe that in the whole history of mankind a prayer has ever been answered. They think that all the sacrifices have been wasted and all the incense has ascended in vain. They do not believe that the world was created and prepared for mankind any more than it was created and prepared for insects. On every hand there seems to be evidence of design for the accomplishment of good and design for the accomplishment of evil. On every side there is the benevolent and the malicious, something toiling to preserve and something laboring to destroy. Everything surrounded by friends and enemies, by the love that protects and by the hate that kills. Design is as apparent in the decay as it is in growth. Nature with one hand builds, and with the other hand tears down. Nature is armed with a sword and shield, slaying and protecting. and protecting only to slay. All life journeying toward death, and all death hastening back to life. We watch the flow and ebb of life and death, the great drama that forever holds the stage, where players act their parts and disappear. The great drama in which all must act, the ignorant as well as the learned, the idiotic and the insane, without rehearsal and without the slightest knowledge of a part or of any plot or purpose in the play. There is mystery everywhere. We try to explain, and the explanation of one fact contradicts another. All things are equal in wonder. One drop of water is as wonderful as all the seas, one grain of sand as wonderful as all the world. One moth with painted wings is as wonderful as all the things that live. One egg from which warmth and darkness woos to life an organized and breathing form, a form with sinews, bones and nerves, with blood and brain, with instincts, passions, thoughts, and wants, is as wonderful as all the stars that wheel in space. The smallest seed wrapped in soil withholds its secrets from the wisest man. The wisdom of the world cannot explain one blade of grass. And yet, theologians, popes, priests, parsons who stand speechless before the wonder of the smallest things know all about God, who with just a wish created everything. They know what his plan and purpose was, the means he uses and the ends he seeks. To them, all mysteries have been revealed. But honest people do not pretend to know. They admit their ignorance, and they say, "We do not know." After all, why should we worship our ignorance, and why should we prostrate ourselves before a guess? Christians say that their God has existed from eternity, that he forever has been, and he forever will be, infinite, wise, and good. What he is, he was, and will ever be, unchanged and unchangeable. Why then should we praise him? He could not have been different from what he was and is. Why should we pray to him? He cannot change. And yet Christians employ their God not to do wrong. The meanest thing charged against the devil is that he leads people into temptation. And yet, in the Lord's Prayer, God is insultingly asked not to imitate the king of fiends. Lead us not into temptation. Why should God demand praise? He was and always will be. He has never learned anything, has never practiced any self-denial, was never tempted, never touched by fear or hope. So why should he demand our praise? Does anyone know that this God ever heard or answered any prayer? Is it known that he governs the world, that he interferes in the affairs of people, that he protects mankind? If God governs the world, why should we credit him for the good and not charge him with the evil? If we thank him for sunshine and harvest, we should also thank him for plague and famine. Only a few days ago, President McKinley, kind of an old sermon, sorry, by proclamation, thanked God for giving us the victory at Santiago. But he didn't thank him for sending the yellow fever. To be consistent, the president should have thanked him for both. What harm does superstition do? What harm is there in believing in fables and legends? To believe in signs and wonders, charms and miracles, gods and devils, heavens and hells, makes the brain an insane ward and the world a madhouse. Reason abdicates and superstition wears the crown. The energies of mankind are wasted in a vain effort to secure the protection of the supernatural. Credulity, ceremony, worship, sacrifice, and prayer take the place of honest work, of real investigation, of intellectual effort. Progress becomes impossible. Superstition has always been and forever will be the enemy of liberty and progress. Superstition created all the gods, angels, devils, ghosts, witches, and demons. Superstition imprisoned the virtuous, tortured the thoughtful, killed the heroic, put chains on the body, manacles on the brain, and utterly destroyed the liberty of speech. Superstition taught that credulity leads to heaven, that doubt is the road to hell, that belief and faith is better than knowledge, and that to ask for evidence is to insult God. Superstition always has been and forever will be the foe of progress, the enemy of education, and the assassination of freedom. Superstition is the only enemy of science in all the world. Spain was at one time owner of half the earth and held within her greedy hands the gold and silver of the world. At that time, all nations were in the darkness of superstition. At that time, the world was governed by priests. Spain clung to her creed. Some nations began to think, but Spain continued to believe. In some countries, the priests lost their power, but not in Spain. In some countries, people began to interest themselves in science, but not in Spain. Spain counted her beads and continued to pray to the Virgin. Spain was busy saving her soul and her zeal. She destroyed herself. She relied on the supernatural, not on knowledge, but on superstition. Her prayers were never answered. Some countries were in the dawn of a new day, but Spain gladly remained in the night. With fire and sword, she exterminated all people who thought. All nations grew great, while Spain grew small. Day by day, her power waned, but her faith increased. She gave her gold to superstition and her brain to the priests, but she faithfully counted her beads. Recently, relying on her God and her priests, on charms and amulets, on holy water and pieces of the true cross, she waged war against our own republic. Bishops blessed her armies and sprinkled holy water on her ships, and yet her armies were defeated and captured. Her ships battered, beached, and burned, and in her helplessness she sued for peace. But she has her creed, and her superstition is not lost. Poor Spain, wrecked by faith, the victim of religion. Believers in the supernatural and a power superior to nature have what they call inspired books. These books constitute the Bible. They say that these books contain the absolute truth and must be believed. He who denies them will be punished with eternal pain. These books are not addressed to human reason. They care nothing for facts. Facts that do not agree with these books are called mistakes. These books are independent of human experience and of human reason. The person who reads these inspired books, looking for contradictions or mistakes, imperils the salvation of his soul. While he reads, he has no right to think and no right to reason. His only duty is to believe. Millions of people have wasted their lives in the study of this book, in trying to harmonize the contradictions and to explain the obscure and the absurd. In doing this, they have justified nearly every crime and cruelty. Perhaps no two of its readers have agreed to its meaning. The more they studied, the more they differed. Hundreds of creeds have been constructed from its inspired messages. In defense of all these creeds and all these contradictions, thousands of volumes have been written. Millions of sermons have been preached. Countless swords have been reddened with blood, and thousands of nights have been made lurid with the faggot's flames. With this book, the theologians imprisoned the soul in the dungeons of fear and made honest doubt a crime. Our God was made by men, sculptured by savages who did the best they could. They made God somewhat like themselves and gave to him their passions and their ideas of right and wrong. As mankind advanced, he slowly changed his God, took a little ferocity from his heart, and put the light of kindness in his eyes. As man progressed, he again changed his God, making him as nearly perfect as he could, and this God was patterned after those who made him. As man became civilized, as he became more merciful, he began to love justice, and his ideal became purer and nobler, and so his God became more merciful and more loving. As Christians have changed their God, they also changed their Bible. The impossible and the absurd, the cruel and the infamous have been mostly thrown aside, and thousands are now engaged in trying to save the inspired word. Of course, the Orthodox still cling to every word and still insist that every line is true. They are the literalist, the fundamentalist. To them, the Bible means exactly what it says. Contradictions cannot disturb their faith. They deny that any contradictions exist. All Orthodox churches are obstructions on the highway of progress. Every believer in the inspired book is a slave who drives reason from her throne and crowns fear in her steed. There were centuries of darkness when religion had control of Christendom during the Middle Ages. Superstition was almost universal. There was no progress, no invention, no discovery. The priests were the enemies of thought and of investigation. They were the shepherds and the people were the sheep. It was their business to guard the flock from the wolves of thought and doubt. This world was of no importance compared with the next, and this life was to be spent in preparing for the life to come. The energies of Christendom were wasted in the vain effort to obtain assistance from the supernatural. The Church endeavored to make the world of one belief, to force all minds into a common mold, and to utterly destroy the individuality of mankind. To accomplish this, it employed every art and artifice that cunning could suggest, and it inflicted every cruelty by every means that malice could invent. But in spite of all, a few people began to think. They began to seek for causes and for the explanations of phenomena. They were not satisfied with the assertions of the Church. They began to invent, to discover, to find the relation between facts and the means that would increase the well-being of their fellow human beings. Movable type was invented and books appeared. It became possible to save the intellectual wealth so that each generation could hand it down to the next. History began to take the place of legend and rumor. The fossil forms of life established the antiquity of man and demonstrated the worthlessness of holy right. Then came evolution, the survival of the fittest, and natural selection. Thousands of mysteries were explained, and science wrested the scepter from superstition. By the light of reason, we divide the useful from the hurtful and the false from the true. We believe in the natural, in the unbroken and unbreakable succession of causes and effects. We deny the existence of supernatural. We do not believe in any God who can be pleased with incense, with kneeling, with bell ringing, head bead counting, fasting, or prayer, or in any God who can be flattered by words of faith or fear. We believe in the natural. We believe in home and fireside, in wife and husband and child and in friend, in the realities of this world. We have faith in facts, in knowledge, and the development of the brain. Anyone who fears to think is superstition's slave. We banish the phantoms, the mistakes and lies, and we cling to the truth. Surely investigation is better than unthinking faith. Surely reason is a better guide than fear. Our desire is that every human being shall be true to himself, unbribed by promises and careless of threats. We want no tyrant on the earth or in the sky. We know that science has given us all we have of value. It is the only civilizer. It has destroyed the phantoms, the winged horrors that filled the savage brain. Science puts honesty above hypocrisy and thoughtful doubt above thoughtless faith. It will give us philosophers, thinkers, and people of learning instead of priests, theologians, and saints. It can abolish poverty, and greater than all else, it can make the whole world free. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Those were very inspirational words. Please turn in your hymnal now to our closing hymn, number 370, All People That on Earth Do Dwell. Please rise as you are willing and able. Please turn in your order of service now to the unison reading of West Valley's mission statement. We agree to provide a safe place to celebrate diversity, draw inspiration for living better lives, foster social and environmental justice, and compassionately support each other in our spiritual searches. Bill will now have the closing words.
I have two quotes from Robert Ingersoll from my Atheist Bible. That kind of fits with the sermon that I read today. First one. Fear believes, courage doubts. Fear falls upon the earth and prays. Courage stands erect and thinks. Fear retreats, courage advances. Fear is barbarism, courage is civilization. Fear believes in witchcraft, in devils and in ghosts. Fear is religion, courage is science. And one more quote. The hands that help are better far than the lips that pray. I'm going to extinguish the challenge, and please be seated for the postlude.